Emotional Arbitrage, Mastering Your Reactions to Protect Your Net Worth, and Peace. Introduction. The Hidden Cost of Losing Control. Welcome. Breathe in slowly. Let it go. Before we begin, I want to invite you to think about a moment when your emotions cost you something. Maybe it was a business deal you sabotaged with a reactive email sent in anger. Maybe it was an investment decision made in a panic that you would never have made with a clear mind. Maybe it was a professional relationship damaged by words spoken in frustration, a negotiation lost because your desperation showed, or an opportunity missed because fear disguised itself as caution and whispered that it was not the right time. These moments are rarely talked about in financial books, but they are everywhere, and they are expensive. The research is unambiguous. Emotional reactivity is one of the greatest destroyers of wealth and well-being available to human beings. Not market crashes, not bad luck, not lack of opportunity. Emotional reactivity, the unexamined, automatic response to the triggers of daily life, quietly erodes financial progress, damages vital relationships, and steals the peace that makes success feel worth having. This audiobook is called Emotional Arbitrage. In financial markets, arbitrage is the practice of exploiting the gap between two prices of the same asset in different markets to generate profit. The gap exists because of inefficiencies, because not everyone has the same information or the same ability to process it clearly. Emotional arbitrage is similar. It is the practice of exploiting the gap between how most people react to the pressures and provocations of professional and financial life, and how you can learn to respond. That gap, the difference between reaction and response, between impulsiveness and intention, is where extraordinary advantage lives. The people who master emotional arbitrage are not cold or unfeeling. They feel everything. They are simply more skilled at choosing what to do with what they feel. And that skill, cultivated deliberately over time, becomes one of the most valuable and durable assets a person can possess. Let us begin. Chapter 1. Understanding the emotional financial connection. Most of us were never taught that our emotions and our finances are deeply, intimately connected. We were taught to think about money in rational terms: income, expenses, interest rates, compound growth. We were taught that the key to financial success was information and discipline. But information and discipline are downstream of something more fundamental: the emotional state from which decisions are made. Consider the investor who knows, rationally, that market downturns are temporary, and that selling during a crash locks in losses that would otherwise recover. She has read the books. She has listened to the podcasts. She knows what she should do. And yet, when the market drops 20% in a week, and the news is full of apocalyptic predictions, she feels the dread in her chest, the urgency in her gut, and she sells, turning a temporary loss into a permanent one. Was that a failure of information? No, it was a failure of emotional regulation. The rational knowledge was present. It was simply overridden by a fear response that the nervous system treated as a life-threatening emergency. Consider the entrepreneur who is in a tense negotiation. He knows he has leverage. He has prepared carefully and his position is strong. Then the other party says something dismissive, something that activates an old wound around not being taken seriously. And suddenly his strategic thinking is hijacked by a need to prove himself. He makes concessions that his strategy did not require, or he escalates aggressively in a way that damages the deal, all because a single emotional trigger bypassed his rational preparation. Consider the professional who receives critical feedback about her work. The feedback is accurate, and if she could process it clearly, it would lead to genuine improvement. Instead, It activates a shame response that she has carried since childhood, and she either collapses in self-doubt or defends herself angrily, blocking the very information that would make her more successful. These are not unusual stories. They are the norm, and in each of them, the financial and professional cost is real. The portfolio value reduced, the deal value lost, the career growth delayed. The emotional arbitrage framework begins with this foundational recognition. Your emotions are not separate from your financial life. They are central to it, and developing mastery over your emotional responses is one of the highest return investments you can make. Chapter 2. The neuroscience of reactive decision-making. To master your emotional responses, it helps to understand what is actually happening in your brain when you react rather than respond. The human brain has, broadly speaking, two processing systems that are relevant here. The first is the limbic system, sometimes called the emotional brain. This system is ancient in evolutionary terms. It processes threat, reward, social connection, and survival-relevant information. It operates very quickly, faster than conscious thought, and it communicates with the body directly, triggering stress hormones, heart rate changes, and the physical sensations we recognize as fear, anger, excitement, or dread. The second is the prefrontal cortex, the most recently evolved part of the human brain. This is the seat of executive function, long-term planning, rational analysis, perspective-taking, impulse control, and the ability to weigh competing priorities. It operates more slowly than the limbic system, but it is capable of far more sophisticated decision-making. Here is the critical dynamic. When the limbic system detects a threat, real or perceived, physical or social, present or imagined, it can partially override the prefrontal cortex. This is what is sometimes called an amygdala hijack. In a genuine physical emergency, this override is life-saving. When you need to dodge an oncoming car, you cannot afford the half-second delay of conscious deliberation. But in financial and professional life, where most threats are social, symbolic, and complex, this same override is often catastrophic. The negotiation that activates feelings of disrespect, the investment decision made during a news cycle designed to trigger fear, the email sent while angry that destroys a relationship worth far more than the dispute that prompted it. In each of these cases, the fast-acting limbic system hijacks the slow-acting prefrontal cortex, and decisions get made without the full benefit of the most sophisticated tool available to us. Emotional arbitrage is not about suppressing the limbic system. It is about developing the capacity to recognize, when it has been activated, to prevent complete prefrontal hijack, and to restore access to your full cognitive resources before making consequential decisions. This is a trainable skill. It is not a personality trait you either have or do not have. It is a capacity that grows with deliberate practice, and every increment of improvement generates real returns in your financial and professional life. Chapter 3. The 7 emotional triggers that cost people the most money. Through the research on behavioral finance and emotional intelligence, certain emotional triggers show up repeatedly as the most financially costly. Understanding your personal relationship with each of these triggers is the beginning of mastering them. The first trigger is fear of loss aversion, the tendency to feel the pain of losing something roughly twice as intensely as the pleasure of gaining the equivalent amount, is one of the most well-documented findings in behavioral economics. It leads to holding losing investments too long, avoiding risks that are actually reasonable, and making conservative decisions during periods of uncertainty that limit upside. Recognizing when your decisions are being driven by loss aversion rather than accurate risk assessment is essential to financial mastery. The second trigger is fear of missing out, the flip side of loss aversion. FOMO drives people to enter investments or opportunities at precisely the moment of peak enthusiasm, when the risk-reward has already shifted against them. It is the force behind market bubbles, behind rushed business decisions, and behind the pattern of buying high and selling low that destroys so much wealth. When you feel urgency and excitement pulling you toward a decision, that is the moment to slow down and examine the underlying math rather than the surrounding emotion. The third trigger is the need for approval and social validation. Financial and professional decisions made primarily to impress others, to signal status, or to gain acceptance are almost always financially suboptimal. They tend to involve spending on visible goods, undercharging because you are afraid of being perceived as greedy, agreeing to unfavorable terms because you want the other party to like you, and avoiding the honest conversations that would serve your interests because you fear disapproval. The fourth trigger is anger and the need to be right. Disputes in business, in negotiation, in professional relationships become vastly more expensive when one or both parties are more committed to being right than to being well served. Legal battles, broken partnerships, lost clients, and damaged reputations are among the financial consequences of letting anger and ego drive decisions that should be driven by long-term interest. The fifth trigger is shame and unworthiness, the belief that you do not deserve financial success, consciously or unconsciously held, expresses itself in self-sabotaging behaviors, underpricing your work, avoiding financial conversations, making impulsive purchases as a form of emotional soothing, failing to negotiate because you feel you have no right to ask for more. Shame is perhaps the most expensive emotion in professional life, precisely because it operates largely out of sight. The sixth trigger is overconfidence. Success can be as dangerous as failure when it generates an inflated sense of one's ability to predict outcomes, assess risks, or outperform markets. Overconfidence leads to concentrated bets, insufficient due diligence, and the dismissal of warning signs that a humbler perspective would take seriously. The seventh trigger is desperation. Financial decisions made from a position of desperation. When you urgently need a deal to close, when you are running out of runway, when you feel you have no alternatives, are almost always made on worse terms than decisions made from a position of stability. Desperation is visible to counterparties and it shifts the balance of power against you. Managing your financial life in a way that minimizes the conditions that produce desperation is itself a form of emotional arbitrage. Chapter 4. The Pause Protocol, your most powerful financial tool. If there is a single practice that underlies all of emotional arbitrage, it is this: the deliberate pause between stimulus and response. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. That space, that pause, is where emotional arbitrage happens. In the heat of a triggered emotional state, the pause feels impossible. Everything in your nervous system is urging urgency. The email must be answered now. The decision must be made now. The argument must be resolved now. The investment must be executed now." This urgency is rarely real. It is almost always generated by the emotional state itself, rather than by the actual demands of the situation. The pause protocol is a structured practice for creating and using that space. The first step is recognition. Before you can choose to pause, you must recognize that you are triggered. The signals are physical: a tightening in the chest, a rise in heart rate, a flushing of the face, a clenching of the jaw or hands, a quickening of breath. These physical signals are your early warning system. When you notice them in a financial or professional context, that is your cue that a pause is needed. The second step is the physiological interrupt. You need to do something that physically signals safety to your nervous system, partially disengaging the fight or flight response and restoring access to your prefrontal cortex. The most effective and universally available tool for this is conscious breathing. A slow, deep breath, 4 counts in, 4 counts held, 6 counts out, activates the parasympathetic nervous system and begins to reduce the physiological arousal that is hijacking your thinking. The third step is the time delay. Give yourself the maximum time the situation actually allows before responding. If you receive a message that triggers you, wait before responding, not 4 hours necessarily, but long enough to complete the physiological interrupt and restore your full cognitive capacity. If you are in a live conversation and feel triggered by time, I want to think carefully about this before I respond. Can I come back to you? This phrase alone has saved countless relationships and negotiations. The fourth step is perspective recovery. Once your nervous system has settled, ask yourself, what is actually at stake here? What would I advise a trusted friend in this exact situation? What decision will I be proudest of in 5 years? These questions recruit the prefrontal cortex back into the decision-making process and bring the long-term perspective that emotional reactivity tends to erase. The pause protocol takes approximately 90 seconds to complete in its minimum form, 90 seconds, and yet those 90 seconds, deployed at the right moment and preserve a relationship, save a deal, void a catastrophic investment decision, or prevent a lawsuit. The return on investment of the pause is essentially incalculable. Chapter 5. Protecting your net worth through emotional discipline. Let us talk concretely about how emotional mastery protects and grows financial wealth. The most direct connection is in investment behavior. Behavioral finance research has consistently shown that the average retail investor significantly underperforms the very funds they invest in because of the buying and selling behavior driven by emotional reactions to market movements. They buy after markets have risen, when excitement is high and valuations are stretched. They sell after markets have fallen, when fear is highest and prices are lowest. The gap between fund performance and investor performance, sometimes called the behavior gap, is driven almost entirely by emotion. The investor who develops the capacity to observe the fear and excitement without acting on them, who makes investment decisions based on predetermined criteria rather than moment-to-moment emotional state, and who has the discipline to stay the course during periods of volatility, outperforms the emotionally reactive investor over virtually any time horizon of meaningful length. This does not require extraordinary intelligence or superior information. It requires emotional mastery. In business and professional life, the financial protection offered by emotional discipline is even more varied and extensive. Negotiations. The outcome of every negotiation is influenced by the emotional state of the participants. The negotiator who is calm, patient, and genuinely unattached to any particular outcome has a profound structural advantage over the negotiator who is eager, anxious, or emotionally reactive. Emotional discipline in negotiation is worth, quite literally, money, in the form of better prices, better terms, and better deals. Client and customer relationships. The emotional skill of genuine listening, of managing your own frustration with grace, of receiving complaints without defensiveness, and of delivering difficult news with composure, directly influences client retention, referrals, and the premium you are able to command. Clients stay with and pay more to professionals who make them feel understood and secure. Leadership. Teams perform better, produce more, and stay longer for leaders who are emotionally stable, who do not project their anxiety onto their teams, who give feedback without cruelty, who handle setbacks with equanimity, and who create psychological safety by modeling composed, thoughtful responses to difficulty. Emotional discipline in leadership is a talent retention and team performance multiplier. Personal financial decisions. How you feel when you walk into a car dealership, a real estate agent's office, or a high-end retail environment directly influences how much you spend. The psychological techniques of professional sellers are specifically designed to activate emotional states, excitement, scarcity, social pressure, identity aspirations that bypass the rational evaluation process. Emotional awareness in consumer contexts is a direct money-saving skill. Chapter 6. Peace as a financial strategy. Most financial and business books treat peace of mind as a reward for financial success, something you get to experience after you have achieved your goals. The emotional arbitrage framework inverts this relationship. Peace of mind is not the reward for financial success. Peace of mind is a precondition for it. Here is why. Decision quality degrades with stress. The research on cognitive function under conditions of chronic stress is unambiguous. Prolonged elevated cortisol levels impair memory, creative problem solving, long-term planning, and emotional regulation. A person operating under chronic financial stress literally makes worse decisions than they would if the stress were reduced, and worse decisions tend to produce worse financial outcomes, which produce more stress, a downward spiral that is, tragically, entirely predictable. The person who protects their peace as an active financial strategy, who maintains adequate financial buffers to reduce the desperation that comes from living on the edge, who sets boundaries on work and relationships that deplete them, who maintains practices like sleep, movement, and mindfulness that regulate their nervous system, is operating their cognitive hardware more efficiently, and better cognitive hardware produces better decisions, and better decisions produce better outcomes. Peace is not soft. Peace is strategic. This refrain changes everything about how you approach your daily practices. Meditation is not just for spiritual development. It is a cognitive performance tool that sharpens the very capacities, attention, emotional regulation, perspective-taking that drive financial decision quality. Exercise is not just for health. The research on exercise and prefrontal cortex function is robust. Regular aerobic activity literally strengthens the neural structures responsible for impulse control and executive decision-making. Sleep is perhaps the most undervalued financial asset of all. Sleep deprivation impairs risk assessment, increases impulsivity, reduces empathy, and degrades almost every cognitive capacity relevant for financial and professional success. The person who consistently sacrifices sleep for productivity is borrowing against their cognitive capital at a catastrophic interest rate. Protecting your peace is protecting your net worth. Chapter 7. Emotional Arbitrage in Relationships. No discussion of emotional mastery and financial protection would be complete without addressing the financial dimension of our most important relationships. Money is the most common source of conflict in intimate partnerships. Financial stress is a leading contributor to divorce, which is one of the most financially destructive events available to most people. The inability to have productive, honest conversations about money, driven by emotional avoidance, shame, fear, and the accumulated charge of past conflicts, costs couples enormous amounts in terms of both relationship quality and actual financial outcomes. Emotional arbitrage in partnership means developing the capacity to have the difficult money conversations with composure and genuine curiosity. It means separating the emotional charge of past money conflicts from the present conversation. It means being able to hear a partner's financial anxiety without becoming defensive, and to share your own financial concerns without attacking. The couples who handle money well are not the ones who never disagree about it. They are the ones who have developed the emotional skill to disagree productively, to treat financial conversations as collaborative problem solving, rather than battlegrounds for deeper unresolved conflicts. In professional relationships, emotional arbitrage is equally valuable. The skill of delivering honest feedback without cruelty, of receiving criticism without collapse or defensiveness, of maintaining productive relationships with difficult clients or colleagues, of repairing damaged professional relationships with genuine accountability rather than deflection. Each of these is an emotional skill with direct financial implications. Consider the consultant who can calmly and confidently raise her rates with long-term clients without the conversation becoming awkward or adversarial. Consider the executive who can deliver difficult organizational news to his team in a way that maintains trust rather than generating fear and turnover. Consider the entrepreneur who can address a customer complaint with such genuine care and composure that the complaining customer becomes a loyal advocate. In each case, the emotional skill is producing a measurable financial result. Chapter 8. Building your emotional arbitrage practice. We have established the why of emotional arbitrage. Let us now turn to the how, the specific daily practices that build the emotional mastery that protects your wealth and deepens your peace. The first practice is mindfulness meditation. Even 10 minutes of daily seated mindfulness practice has been shown across hundreds of peer-reviewed studies to increase activity in the prefrontal cortex, reduce amygdala reactivity, improve emotional regulation, and strengthen the very neural capacities that underlie wise decision-making. Start with 5 minutes. Use a guided app if helpful. The only requirement is consistency. A small daily practice compounding over months and years produces profound changes in the quality of your attention and the steadiness of your emotional responses. The second practice is the daily emotional audit. At the end of each day, take 5 minutes to review the emotional events of the day, not to judge yourself, but to observe with curiosity. What triggered me today? How did I respond? Was my response aligned with my long-term interests and values? What would a more skillful response have looked like? This regular reflection builds emotional self-awareness and begins to shorten a lag between trigger and recognition, so that over time, you catch the trigger earlier and earlier, giving yourself more and more space to choose your response. The third practice is somatic awareness. The body is the first to know that you are emotionally activated before the conscious mind catches up. Developing the habit of regularly scanning your body for physical tension signals, tight shoulders, clenched jaw, constricted breath, knotted stomach, gives you an early warning system for emotional activation that allows you to deploy the pause protocol before the hijack is complete. The fourth practice is the pre-mortem. Before any significant financial or professional decision, take time to imagine that the decision was made and went badly. What emotional forces might have driven a poor decision? Fear, overconfidence, urgency, desire for approval. The pre-mortem recruits your emotional awareness into the decision process before the fact, rather than after. The fifth practice is the trusted counsel relationship. Identify one person in your life, a mentor, a coach, a trusted friend, with whom you can think out loud about financially and professionally significant decisions. The act of articulating your reasoning to another person who can ask honest questions and offer perspective is one of the most effective safeguards against emotionally driven decision errors. We all have blind spots. A trusted counsel relationship helps make those blind spots visible before they become expensive. Chapter 9. The Compounding Returns of Emotional Mastery. We have talked about emotional mastery as protection of your financial decisions, your relationships, your peace, but I want to close by talking about it as a generator of extraordinary returns over time. Every skill compounds. The more you use it, the more refined it becomes. The more refined it becomes, the more situations it applies to. And the returns on a compounding skill are not linear, they are exponential. Consider what happens over a decade of consistent emotional arbitrage practice. In the first year, the gains are modest but real. Fewer reactive emails that damage relationships, better negotiation outcomes as composure replaces anxiety, sounder investment decisions as fear and greed are recognized rather than obeyed. By the third year, the practice is beginning to change how others experience you. Clients find you uniquely steady and trustworthy. Teams are more productive under your calmer leadership. Business partnerships go deeper because your emotional reliability makes collaboration feel safe. By the fifth year, your reputation for emotional intelligence has become a genuine market differentiator. You are sought out for difficult situations precisely because you can be trusted to handle them with wisdom rather than reactivity. The premium you command, in fees, in compensation, in the quality of partners and opportunities that come your way, reflects this reputation. By the 10th year, the compounding is profound. The relationships you have maintained through skillful emotional navigation have become sources of opportunity, referral, and support that could not have been purchased at any price. The investment decisions you have made without panic have produced the long-term returns that patient capital generates. The inner peace you have cultivated has made success genuinely satisfying rather than merely accumulative. This is the ultimate return on emotional arbitrage, not just the protection of what you have built, but the creation of a life in which what you have built actually feels like enough. Conclusion. The space between stimulus and response. We return, at the close of our journey, to that space Frankl described, the space between stimulus and response, where our freedom and our power live. Professional life will always provide stimuli. Markets will be volatile. Colleagues will be difficult. Negotiations will be tense. Feedback will sometimes sting. Financial pressure will sometimes be real. Uncertainty will never fully dissolve. But in the space between those stimuli and your response, in that breath, that pause, that moment of self-awareness, lies everything that emotional arbitrage promises: the return of your prefrontal cortex, the clarity of perspective, the choice to respond in alignment with your deepest interests and values, rather than in accordance with a fear response shaped by ancient biology. That space is always available to you. It is always there. And every time you find it, every time you choose the considered response over the reactive one, you are making a deposit into the most important account you have, the account of your own wisdom, your own character, and your own peace. Mastering your reactions will not make your life without challenge. It will make you someone who meets challenge with grace. And grace, as it turns out, is one of the most financially and personally valuable qualities a human being can cultivate. Thank you for listening. May your reactions serve your vision, and may your peace protect everything you are building.